By all my senses, all my faculties, I know that the ice storm is nature's supremest achievement in the domain of the superb and the beautiful. And by my reason, at least, I know that the Taj is man's ice storm. In the ice storm, every one of the myriad ice beads pendant from twig and branch is an individual gem, and changes color with every motion caused by the wind. Each tree carries a million, and a forest front exhibits the splendors of the single tree multiplied by 1,000. It occurs to me now that I have never seen the ice storm put upon canvas, and have not heard that any painter has tried to do it. I wonder why that is. Is it that paint cannot counterfeit the intense blaze of a sun-flooded jewel? There should be, and must be, a reason, and a good one, why the most enchanting sight that nature has created has been neglected by the brush. Often, the surest way to convey misinformation is to tell the strict truth. The describers of the Taj have used the word gem in its strictest sense, its scientific sense. In that sense, it is a mild word and promises but little to the eye, nothing bright, nothing brilliant, nothing sparkling, nothing splendid in the way of color. It accurately describes the sober and unobtrusive gemwork of the Taj. That is, to the very highly educated one person in 1,000. But it most falsely describes it to the 999. But the 999 are the people who ought to be especially taken care of. And to them, it does not mean quiet-colored designs wrought in carnelians or agates or such things. They know the word in its wide and ordinary sense only, and so to them it means diamonds and rubies and opals and their kindred. And the moment their eyes fall upon it in print, they see a vision of glorious colors clothed in fire. These describers are writing for the general, and so, in order to make sure of being understood, they ought to use words in their ordinary sense or else explain. The word fountain means one thing in Syria, where there is but a handful of people. It means quite another thing in North America, where there are 75 million. If I were describing some Syrian scenery and should exclaim, within the narrow space of a quarter of a mile square I saw, in the glory of the flooding moonlight, 200 noble fountains, imagine the spectacle. The North American would have a vision of clustering columns of water soaring aloft, bending over in graceful arches, bursting in beaded spray and raining white fire in the moonlight, and he would be deceived. But the Syrian would not be deceived. He would merely see 200 freshwater springs, 200 drowsing puddles, as level and unpretentious and unexcited as so many doormats, and even with the help of the moonlight, he would not lose his grip in the presence of the exhibition. My word fountain would be correct. It would speak the strict truth, and it would convey the strict truth to the handful of Syrians and the strictest misinformation to the North American millions. With their gems and more gems and gems again, and still other gems, the describers of the Taj are within their legal but not their moral rights. They are dealing in the strictest scientific truth, and in doing it, they succeed to admiration in telling what ain't so. Chapter 60. Satan impatiently to newcomer. The trouble with you Chicago people is that you think you are the best people down here, whereas you are merely the most numerous. Pudd'nhead Wilson's New Calendar. We wandered contentedly around here and there in India, to Lahore, among other places, where the lieutenant governor lent me an elephant. This hospitality stands out in my experiences in a stately isolation. It was a fine elephant, affable, gentlemanly, educated, and I was not afraid of it. I even rode it with confidence through the crowded lanes of the native city, where it scared all the horses out of their senses, and where children were always just escaping its feet. It took the middle of the road in a fine, independent way, and left it to the world to get out of the way or take the consequences. I am used to being afraid of collisions when I ride or drive, but when one is on top of an elephant, that feeling is absent. I could have ridden in comfort through a regiment of runaway teams. I could easily learn to prefer an elephant to any other vehicle, partly because of that immunity from collisions, and partly because of the fine view one has from up there, and partly because of the dignity one feels in that high place, and partly because one can look in at the windows and see what is going on. Privately among the family, the Lahore horses were used to elephants, but they were rapturously afraid of them just the same. It seemed curious. Perhaps the better they know the elephant, the more they respect him in that peculiar way. In our own case, we are not afraid of dynamite till we get acquainted with it. We drifted as far as Rawalpindi, away up on the Afghan frontier. I think it was the Afghan frontier, but it may have been Herzegovina. It was around there somewhere. And down again to Delhi, to see the ancient architectural wonders there and in Old Delhi and not describe them, and also to see the scene of the illustrious assault in the Mutiny days when the British carried Delhi by storm, one of the marvels of history for impudent daring and immortal valor. We had a refreshing rest there in Delhi, in a great old mansion which possessed historical interest. It was built by a rich Englishman who had become Orientalized, so much so that he had a zanana. But he was a broad-minded man and remained so. To please his harem, he built a mosque. To please himself, he built an English church. That kind of a man will arrive somewhere. In the mutiny days, the mansion was the British general's headquarters. It stands in a great garden Oriental fashion, and about it are many noble trees. The trees harbor monkeys, and they are monkeys of a watchful and enterprising sort, and not much troubled with fear. They invade the house whenever they get a chance, and carry off everything they don't want. One morning, the master of the house was in his bath, and the window was open. Near it stood a pot of yellow paint and a brush. Some monkeys appeared in the window. To scare them away, the gentleman threw his sponge at them. They did not scare at all. They jumped into the room and threw yellow paint all over him from the brush and drove him out. Then they painted the walls and the floor and the tank and the windows and the furniture yellow, and were in the dressing room painting that when help arrived and rooted them. Two of these creatures came into my room in the early morning, through a window whose shutters I had left open, and when I woke one of them was before the glass brushing his hair, and the other one had my notebook, and was reading a page of humorous notes and crying. I did not mind the one with the hairbrush, but the conduct of the other one hurt me. It hurts me yet. I threw something at him, and that was wrong, for my host had told me that the monkeys were best left alone. They threw everything at me that they could lift, and then went into the bathroom to get some more things, and I shut the door on them. At Jaipur in Rajputana, we made a considerable stay. We were not in the native city, but several miles from it in the small European official suburb. There were but few Europeans, only 14, but they were all kind and hospitable, and it amounted to being at home. In Jaipur, we found again what we had found all about India, that while the Indian servant is in his way a very real treasure, he will sometimes bear watching, and the Englishman watches him. If he sends him on an errand, he wants more than the man's word for it that he did the errand. When fruit and vegetables were sent to us, a chit came with them, a receipt for us to sign, otherwise the things might not arrive. If a gentleman sent up his carriage, the chit stated from such and such an hour to such and such an hour, which made it unhandy for the coachman and his 2 or 3 subordinates to put us off with a part of the allotted time and devote the rest of it to a lark of their own. We were pleasantly situated in a small 2-storied inn, in an empty large compound which was surrounded by a mud wall as high as a man's head. The inn was kept by 9 Hindu brothers, its owners. They lived with their families in a 1-storied building within the compound, but off to one side, and there was always a long pile of their little comely brown children loosely stacked in its veranda, and a detachment of the parents wedged among them, smoking the hookah or the howdah, or whatever they call it. By the veranda stood a palm, and a monkey lived in it and led a lonesome life, and always looked sad and weary, and the crows bothered him a good deal. The inn cow poked about the compound and emphasized the secluded and country air of the place, and there was a dog of no particular breed, who was always present in the compound, and always asleep, always stretched out baking in the sun, and adding to the deep tranquility and reposefulness of the place, when the crows were away on business. White draperied servants were coming and going all the time, but they seemed only spirits, for their feet were bare and made no sound. Down the lane, a piece lived an elephant in the shade of a noble tree, and rocked, and reached about with his trunk, begging of his brown mistress or fumbling the children playing at his feet. And there were camels about, but they go on velvet feet, and were proper to the silence and serenity of the surroundings. The Satan mentioned at the head of this chapter was not our Satan, but the other one. Our Satan was lost to us. In these later days he had passed out of our life, lamented by me, and sincerely. I was missing him, I am missing him yet after all these months. He was an astonishing creature to fly around and do things. He didn't always do them quite right, but he did them, and did them suddenly. There was no time wasted, you would say. Pack the trunks and bags, Satan. We're good, very good. Then there would be a brief sound of thrashing and slashing and humming and buzzing, and a spectacle as of a whirlwind spinning gowns and jackets and coats and boots and things through the air, and then with bow and touch. Already, master. It was wonderful, it made one dizzy. He crumpled dresses a good deal, and he had no particular plan about the work, at first, except to put each article into the trunk it didn't belong in, but he soon reformed in this matter, not entirely, for, to the last, he would cram into the satchel sacred to literature any odds and ends of rubbish that he couldn't find a handy place for elsewhere. When threatened with death for this, it did not trouble him. He only looked pleasant, saluted with soldierly grace, said, "We're good," and did it again next day. He was always busy, kept the rooms tidied up, the boots polished, the clothes brushed, the wash basin full of clean water, my dress clothes laid out and ready for the lecture hall an hour ahead of time. And he dressed me from head to heel in spite of my determination to do it myself, according to my lifelong custom. He was a born boss and loved to command, and to jaw and dispute with inferiors and harry them and bullyrag them. He was fine at the railway station. Yes, he was at his finest there. He would shoulder and plunge and paw his violent way through the packed multitude of natives with 19 coolies at his tail, each bearing a trifle of luggage, one a trunk, another a parasol, another a shawl, another a fan, and so on. One article to each, and the longer the procession, the better he was suited. And he was sure to make for some engaged sleeper and begin to hurl the owners things out of it, swearing that it was ours, and that there had been a mistake. Arrived at our own sleeper, he would undo the bedding bundles and make the beds and put everything to rights and shipshape in 2 minutes. Then put his head out at a window and have a restful good time abusing his gang of coolies and disputing their bill until we arrived and made him pay them and stop his noise. Speaking of noise, he certainly was the noisiest little devil in India, and that is saying much, very much indeed. I loved him for his noise, but the family detested him for it. They could not abide it, they could not get reconciled to it. It humiliated them. As a rule, when we got within 600 yards of one of those big railway stations, a mighty racket of screaming and shrieking and shouting and storming would break upon us, and I would be happy to myself, and the family would say with shame, "There, that's Satan, why do you keep him?" And sure enough, there in the whirling midst of 1,500 wondering people, we would find that little scrap of a creature gesticulating like a spider with the colic, his black eyes snapping, his fez tassel dancing, his jaws pouring out floods of billingsgate upon his gang of beseeching and astonished coolies. I loved him, I couldn't help it, but the family, why, they could hardly speak of him with patience. To this day I regret his loss and wish I had him back, but it is different with them. He was a native and came from Surat. 20 degrees of latitude lay between his birthplace and Manuel's, and 1,500 between their ways and characters and dispositions. I only liked Manuel, but I loved Satan. This latter's real name was intensely Indian. I could not quite get the hang of it, but it sounded like Bunder Rao Ram Chunder Clam Chowder. It was too long for handy use anyway, so I reduced it. When he had been with us 2 or 3 weeks, he began to make mistakes which I had difficulty in patching up for him. Approaching Benares one day, he got out of the train to see if he could get up a misunderstanding with somebody, for it had been a weary, long journey, and he wanted to freshen up. He found what he was after, but kept up his powwow a shade too long and got left. So there we were in a strange city and no chambermaid. It was awkward for us, and we told him he must not do so any more. He saluted and said in his dear, pleasant way, "We're good." Then at Lucknow he got drunk. I said it was a fever, and got the family's compassion and solicitude aroused. So they gave him a teaspoonful of liquid quinine, and it set his vitals on fire. He made several grimaces which gave me a better idea of the Lisbon earthquake than any I have ever got of it from paintings and descriptions. His drunk was still portentously solid next morning, but I could have pulled him through with the family if he would only have taken another spoonful of that remedy. But no, although he was stupefied, his memory still had flickerings of life. So he smiled a divinely dull smile and said, fumblingly saluting, "Excuse me, Mem Saheb, excuse me, Missy Saheb, Satan not prefer it, please." Then some instinct revealed to them that he was drunk. They gave him prompt notice that next time this happened he must go. He got out a maudlin and most gentle, "Wear good," and saluted indefinitely. Only 1 short week later he fell again. And oh sorrow, not in a hotel this time, but in an English gentleman's private house. And in Agra of all places, so he had to go. When I told him, he said patiently, "Wear good," and made his parting salute and went out from us to return no more forever. Dear me, I would rather have lost 100 angels than that one poor lovely devil. What style he used to put on, in a swell hotel or in a private house. Snow-white muslin from his chin to his bare feet, a crimson sash embroidered with gold thread around his waist, and on his head a great sea-green turban like to the turban of the Grand Turk. He was not a liar, but he will become one if he keeps on. He told me once that he used to crack coconuts with his teeth when he was a boy, and when I asked how he got them into his mouth, he said he was upward of 6 feet high at that time and had an unusual mouth. And when I followed him up and asked him what had become of that other foot, he said a house fell on him and he was never able to get his stature back again. Swervings like these from the strict line of fact often beguile a truthful man on and on until he eventually becomes a liar. His successor was a Mohammedan, Sahadat Mohammed Khan, very dark, very tall, very grave. He went always in flowing masses of white from the top of his big turban down to his bare feet. His voice was low. He glided about in a noiseless way and looked like a ghost. He was competent and satisfactory, but where he was, it seemed always Sunday. It was not so in Satan's time. Jaipur is intensely Indian, but it has two or three features which indicate the presence of European science and European interest in the weal of the common public, such as the liberal water supply furnished by great works built at the state's expense. Good sanitation, resulting in a degree of healthfulness unusually high for India. A noble pleasure garden with privileged days. For women, schools for the instruction of native youth in advanced art, both ornamental and utilitarian, and a new and beautiful palace stocked with a museum of extraordinary interest and value. Without the Maharaja's sympathy and purse, these beneficences could not have been created. But he is a man of wide views and large generosities, and all such matters find hospitality with him. We drove off into the city from the Hotel Kaiserreihind, a journey which was always full of interest, both night and day. For that country road was never quiet, never empty, but was always India in motion, always a streaming flood of brown people clothed in smouchings from the rainbow. A tossing and moiling flood, happy, noisy, a charming and satisfying confusion of strange human and strange animal life, and equally strange and outlandish vehicles. And the city itself is a curiosity. Any Indian city is that, but this one is not like any other that we saw. It is shut up in a lofty turreted wall. The main body of it is divided into 6 parts by perfectly straight streets that are more than 100 feet wide. The blocks of houses exhibit a long frontage of the most taking architectural quaintnesses, the straight lines being broken everywhere by pretty little balconies, pillared and highly ornamented, and other cunning and cozy and inviting perches and projections, and many of the fronts are curiously pictured by the brush, and the whole of them have the soft, rich tint of strawberry ice cream. One cannot look down the far stretch of the chief street and persuade himself that these are real houses, and that it is all out of doors. The impression that it is an unreality, a picture, a scene in a theater, is the only one that will take hold. Then there came a great day when this illusion was more pronounced than ever. A rich Hindu had been spending a fortune upon the manufacture of a crowd of idols and accompanying paraphernalia, whose purpose was to illustrate scenes in the life of his especial god or saint, and this fine show was to be brought through the town in processional state at 10 in the morning. As we passed through the great public pleasure garden on our way to the city, we found it crowded with natives. That was one sight. Then there was another. In the midst of the spacious lawn stands the palace which contains the museum, a beautiful construction of stone which shows arch colonnades, one above another, and receding, terrace fashion toward the sky. Every one of these terraces, all the way to the top one, was packed and jammed with natives. One must try to imagine those solid masses of splendid color, one above another, up and up, against the blue sky, and the Indian sun turning them all to beds of fire and flame. Later, when we reached the city and glanced down the chief avenue, smoldering in its crushed strawberry tint, those splendid effects were repeated. For every balcony and every fanciful birdcage of a snuggery countersunk in the house fronts, and all the long lines of roofs were crowded with people, and each crowd was an explosion of brilliant color. Then the wide street itself, away down and down and down into the distance, was alive with gorgeously clothed people not still, but moving, swaying, drifting, eddying, a delirious display of all colors and all shades of color, delicate, lovely, pale, soft, strong, stunning, vivid, brilliant. A sort of storm of sweet bea blossoms passing on, the wings of a hurricane. And presently, through this storm of color, came swaying and swinging the majestic elephants, clothed in their Sunday best of gaudinesses, and the long procession of fanciful trucks freighted with their groups of curious and costly images, and then the long rearguard of stately camels with their picturesque riders. For color and picturesqueness and novelty and outlandishness and sustained interest and fascination, it was the most satisfying show I had ever seen, and I suppose I shall not have the privilege of looking upon its like again. Chapter 61. In the first place, God made idiots. This was for practice. Then he made school boards. Pudd'nhead Wilson's New Calendar. Suppose we applied no more ingenuity to the instruction of deaf and dumb and blind children than we sometimes apply in our American public schools to the instruction of children who are in possession of all their faculties. The result would be that the deaf and dumb and blind would acquire nothing. They would live and die as ignorant as bricks and stones. The methods used in the asylums are rational. The teacher exactly measures the child's capacity, to begin with, and from thence onwards the tasks imposed are nicely gauged to the gradual development of that capacity. The tasks keep pace with the steps of the child's progress. They don't jump miles and leagues ahead of it by irrational caprice and land in vacancy, according to the average public school plan. In the public school, apparently, they teach the child to spell cat, then ask it to calculate an eclipse. When it can read words of 2 syllables, they require it to explain the circulation of the blood. When it reaches the head of the infant class, they bully it with conundrums that cover the domain of universal knowledge. This sounds extravagant, and is, yet it goes no great way beyond the facts. I received a curious letter one day from the Punjab. You must pronounce it Punjab. The handwriting was excellent, and the wording was English, and yet not exactly English. The style was easy and smooth and flowing, yet there was something subtly foreign about it, a something tropically ornate and sentimental and rhetorical. It turned out to be the work of a Hindu youth, the holder of a humble clerical billet in a railway office. He had been educated in one of the numerous colleges of India. Upon inquiry, I was told that the country was full of young fellows of his like. They had been educated away up to the snow summits of learning, and the market for all this elaborate cultivation was minutely out of proportion to the vastness of the product. This market consisted of some thousands of small clerical posts under the government, the supply of material for it was multitudinous. If this youth with the flowing style and the blossoming English was occupying a small railway clerkship, it meant that there were hundreds and hundreds as capable as he, or he would be in a high place. And it certainly meant that there were thousands whose education and capacity had fallen a little short and that they would have to go without places. Apparently, then, the colleges of India were doing what our high schools have long been doing, richly oversupplying the market for highly educated service, and thereby doing a damage to the scholar, and through him to the country. At home, I once made a speech, deploring the injuries inflicted by the high school in making handicrafts distasteful to boys who would have been willing to make a living at trades and agriculture if they had, but had the good luck to stop with the common school. But I made no converts. Not one in a community overrun with educated idlers who were above following their fathers' mechanical trades, yet could find no market for their book knowledge. The same mail that brought me the letter from the Punjab brought also a little book published by Messrs. Thacker, Spink and Co. of Calcutta, which interested me, for both its preface and its contents treated of this matter of overeducation. In the preface occurs this paragraph from the Calcutta Review. For government office, read dry goods clerkship, and it will fit more than one region of America. The education that we give makes the boys a little less clownish in their manners, and more intelligent when spoken to by strangers. On the other hand, it has made them less contented with their lot in life, and less willing to work with their hands. The form which discontent takes in this country is not of a healthy kind. For, the natives of India consider that the only occupation worthy of an educated man is that of a writership in some office, and especially in a government office. The village schoolboy goes back to the plow with the greatest reluctance, and the town schoolboy carries the same discontent and inefficiency into his father's workshop. Sometimes these ex-students positively refuse at first to work, and more than once parents have openly expressed their regret that they ever allowed their sons to be inveigled to school. The little book which I am quoting from is called Indo-Anglian Literature, and is well stocked with Babu, English, clerkly English, booky English acquired in the schools. Some of it is very funny, almost as funny, perhaps, as what you and I produce when we try to write in a language not our own, but much of it is surprisingly correct and free. If I were going to quote good English, but I am not. India is well stocked with natives who speak it and write it as well as the best of us. I merely wish to show some of the quaint imperfect attempts at the use of our tongue. There are many letters in the book, poverty imploring help, bread, money, kindness, office, generally an office, a clerkship, some way to get food and a rag out of the applicant's unmarketable education, and food not for himself alone, but sometimes for a dozen helpless relations in addition to his own family. For those people are astonishingly unselfish and admirably faithful to their ties of kinship. Among us, I think there is nothing approaching it. Strange as some of these wailing and supplicating letters are, humble and even groveling as some of them are, and quaintly funny and confused as a goodly number of them are, there is still a pathos about them, as a rule, that checks the rising laugh and reproaches it. In the following letter, father, is not to be read literally. In Ceylon, a little native beggar girl embarrassed me by calling me father, although I knew she was mistaken. I was so new that I did not know that she was merely following the custom of the dependent and the supplicant. Sir, I pray please to give me some action, work, for I am very poor boy, I have no one to help me even so father for it, so it seemed in thy good sight. You give the telegraph office. And another work, what is your wish, I am very poor boy. This understand, what is your wish, you my father, I am your son, this understand, what is your wish. Your servant, PCB. Through ages of debasing oppression suffered by these people at the hands of their native rulers, they come legitimately by the attitude and language of fawning and flattery, and one must remember this in mitigation when passing judgment upon the native character. It is common in these letters to find the petitioner furtively trying to get at the white man's soft religious side. Even this poor boy baits his hook with a macerated Bible text in the hope that it may catch something if all else fail. Here is an application for the post of instructor in English to some children. My dear sir or gentleman, that your petitioner has much qualification in the language of English to instruct the young boys. I was given to understand that you're of suitable children has to acquire the knowledge of English language. As a sample of the flowery Eastern style, I will take a sentence or two from a long letter written by a young native to the Lieutenant Governor of Bengal, an application for employment. Honored and much respected sir, I hope your honor will condescend to hear the tale of this poor creature. I shall overflow with gratitude at this mark of your royal condescension. The bird-like happiness has flown away from my nest-like heart, and has not hitherto returned from the period whence the rose of my father's life suffered the autumnal breath of death. In plain English, he passed through the gates of grave, and from that hour the phantom of delight has never danced before me. It is all school English, book English, you see, and good enough, too, all things considered. If the native boy had but that one study he would shine, he would dazzle, no doubt, but that is not the case. He is situated as are our public school children, loaded down with an overfreightage of other studies. And frequently, they are as far beyond the actual point of progress reached by him, and suited to the stage of development attained, as could be imagined by the insanest fancy. Apparently like our public school boy, he must work, work, work in school and out and play but little. Apparently like our public school boy, his education consists in learning things, not the meaning of them. He is fed upon the husks, not the corn. From several essays written by native schoolboys in answer to the question of how they spend their day, I select one, the one which goes most into detail. 66. At the break of day, I rises from my own bed and finish my daily duty. Then I employ myself o'clock, after which I employ myself to bathe, then take for my body some sweet meat. And just at 9:12 I came to school to attend my class duty. Then at 2:12 p.m. I return from school and engage myself to do my natural duty. Then I engage for a quarter to take my tiffin. Then I study p.m., after which I began to play anything which comes in my head. After 8:12, half past to 8 we began to sleep. Before sleeping I told a constable just 11. Oh, he came and rose us from 11:30. We began to read still morning. It is not perfectly clear, now that I come to cipher upon it. He gets up at about 5 in the morning, or along there somewhere, and goes to bed about 15 or 16 hours afterward. That much of it seems straight, but why he should rise again 3 hours later and resume his studies till morning is puzzling. I think it is because he is studying history. History requires a world of time and bitter hard work when your education is no further advanced than the cat's. When you are merely stuffing yourself with a mixed-up mess of empty names and random incidents and elusive dates, which no one teaches you how to interpret and which, uninterpreted, pay you not a farthing's value for your waste of time. Yes, I think he had to get up at 11:30 p.m. in order to be sure to be perfect with his history lesson by noon, with results as follows from a Calcutta school examination. Q. Who was Cardinal Wolsey? Cardinal Wolsey was an editor of a paper named North Britain. Number 45 of his publication, he charged the king of uttering a lie from the throne. He was arrested and cast into prison, and after releasing went to France. 3. As Bishop of York but died in dysentery in a church on his way to be blockheaded. 8. Cardinal Wolsey was the son of Edward Roman IV. After his father's death, he himself ascended the throne at the age of 10 only, but when he surpassed, or when he was fallen in his 20 years of age at that time, he wished to make a journey in his countries under him, but he was opposed by his mother to do journey, and according to his mother's example he remained in the home, and then became king. After many times, obstacles, and many confusion, he become king, and afterwards his brother. There is probably not a word of truth in that. Q. What is the meaning of Ikdeen? 10. An honor conferred on the first or eldest sons of English sovereigns. It is nothing more than some feathers. 11. Ikdeen was the word which was written on the feathers of the blind king who came to fight, being interlaced with the bridles of the horse. 13. Ikdeen is a title given to Henry Roman VII by the Pope of Rome, when he forwarded the Reformation of Cardinal Wolsey to Rome, and for this reason he was called Commander of the Faith. A dozen or so of this kind of insane answers are quoted in the book from that examination. Each answer is sweeping proof, all by itself, that the person uttering it was pushed ahead of where he belonged when he was put into history. Proof that he had been put to the task of acquiring history before he had had a single lesson in the art of acquiring it, which is the equivalent of dumping a pupil into geometry before he has learned the progressive steps which lead up to it and make its acquirement possible. Those Calcutta novices had no business with history. There was no excuse for examining them in it, no excuse for exposing them and their teachers. They were totally empty. There was nothing to examine. Helen Keller has been dumb, stone deaf, and stone blind ever since she was a little baby a year and a half old. And now at 16 years of age, this miraculous creature, this wonder of all the ages, passes the Harvard University examination in Latin, German, French history, Bell's letters, and such things, and does it brilliantly, too, not in a commonplace fashion. She doesn't know merely things, she is splendidly familiar with the meanings of them. When she writes an essay on a Shakespearean character, her English is fine and strong, her grasp of the subject is the grasp of one who knows, and her page is electric with light. Has Miss Sullivan taught her by the methods of India and the American public school? No, oh no, for then she would be deafer and dumber and blinder than she was before. It is a pity that we can't educate all the children in the asylums. To continue the Calcutta exposure. What is the meaning of a sheriff? 25. Sheriff is a post opened in the time of John. The duty of sheriff here in Calcutta, to look out and catch those carriages which is rashly driven out by the coachman, but it is a high post in England. 26. Sheriff was the English bill of common prayer. 27. The man with whom the accusative persons are placed is called sheriff. 28. Sheriff, Latin term for shrub, we called broom, worn by the first Earl of Anjou, as an emblem of humility when they went to the pilgrimage, and from this their hairs took their crest and surname. 29. Sheriff is a kind of titless sect of people, as barons, nobles, etc. 30. Sheriff, a title given on those persons who were respective and pious in England. The students were examined in the following bulky matters: geometry, the solar spectrum, the Habeas Corpus Act, the British Parliament, and in metaphysics they were asked to trace the progress of skepticism from Descartes to Hume. It is within bounds to say that some of the results were astonishing. Without doubt, there were students present who justified their teachers' wisdom in introducing them to these studies. But the fact is also evident that others had been pushed into these studies to waste their time over them when they could have been profitably employed in hunting smaller game. Under the head of geometry, one of the answers is this. 49. The whole BD equals the whole Ka, and so. To me, this is cloudy, but I was never well up in geometry. That was the only effort made among the 5 students who appeared for examination in geometry. The other 4 wailed and surrendered without a fight. They are piteous wails, too, wails of despair, and one of them is an eloquent reproach. It comes from a poor fellow who has been laden beyond his strength by a stupid teacher, and is eloquent in spite of the poverty of its English. The poor chap finds himself required to explain riddles which even Sir Isaac Newton was not able to understand. 50. Oh my dear father, examiner, you my father, and you kindly give a number of pass you my great father. 51. I am a poor boy and have no means to support my mother and 2 brothers who are suffering much for want of food. I get 4 rupees monthly from charity fund of this place, from which I send 2 rupees for their support, and keep 2 for my own support. Father, if I relate the unlucky circumstance under which we are placed, then, I think, you will not be able to suppress the tender tear. 52. Sir which Sir Isaac Newton and other experienced mathematicians cannot understand, I being 3rd of entrance class, can understand these which is too impossible to imagine. And my examiner also has put very tiresome and very heavy propositions to prove. We must remember that these pupils had to do their thinking in one language and express themselves in another, an alien one. It was a heavy handicap. I have by me English as she is taught, a collection of American examinations made in the public schools of Brooklyn by one of the teachers, Miss Caroline B. Leroux. An extract or two from its pages will show that when the American pupil is using but one language, and that one his own, his performance is no whit better than his Indian brother, S. On history, Christopher Columbus was called the father of his country. Queen Isabella of Spain sold her watch and chain and other millinery so that Columbus could discover America. The Indian Wars were very desecrating to the country. The Indians pursued their warfare by hiding in the bushes and then scalping them. Captain John Smith has been styled the father of his country. His life was saved by his daughter Pocahontas. The Puritans found an insane asylum in the wilds of America. The Stamp Act was to make everybody stamp all materials, so they should be null and void. Washington died in Spain, almost broken-hearted. His remains were taken to the cathedral in Havana. Guerrilla warfare was where men rode on gorillas. In Brooklyn, as in India, they examine a pupil, and when they find out he doesn't know anything, they put him into literature, or geometry, or astronomy, or government, or something like that, so that he can properly display the ossification of the whole system. On literature, Bracebridge Hall was written by Henry Irving. Edgar A. Poe was a very curdling writer. Beowulf wrote the scriptures. Ben Jonson survived Shakespeare in some respects. In the Canterbury Tale, it gives account of King Alfred on his way to the shrine of Thomas Bucket. Chaucer was the father of English pottery. Chaucer was succeeded by H. Wads, Longfellow. We will finish with a couple of samples of literature, one from America, the other from India. The first is a Brooklyn public school boy's attempt to turn a few verses of The Lady of the Lake into prose. You will have to concede that he did it. The man who rode on the horse performed the whip, and an instrument made of steel alone with strong ardor not diminishing. For, being tired from the time passed with hard labor, overworked with anger, and ignorant with weariness, while every breath for labor he drew with cries full of sorrow, the young deer made him perfect who worked hard filtered in sight. The following paragraph is from a little book which is famous in India, the biography of a distinguished Hindu judge, Anukul Chunder Mukherjee. It was written by his nephew and is unintentionally funny, in fact, exceedingly so. I offer here the closing scene. If you would like to sample the rest of the book, it can be had by applying to the publishers, Messrs. Thacker, Spink & Co., Calcutta. And having said these words, he hermetically sealed his lips, not to open them again. All the well-known doctors of Calcutta that could be procured for a man of his position and wealth were brought. Doctors Payne, Farah, and Nilmadhub Mukherjee and others. They did what they could do, with their puissance and knack of medical knowledge, but it proved after all as if to milk the ram. His wife and children had not the mournful consolation to hear his last words. He remained sotto voce for a few hours, and then was taken from us at 6:12 p.m. according to the caprice of God which passeth understanding. Chapter 62. There are no people who are quite so vulgar as the over-refined ones. Pudd'nhead Wilson's New Calendar. We sailed from Calcutta toward the end of March, stopped a day at Madras, 2 or 3 days in Ceylon, then sailed westward on a long flight for Mauritius. From my diary. We are far abroad upon the smooth waters of the Indian Ocean, now. It is shady and pleasant and peaceful under the vast spread of the awnings, and life is perfect again, ideal. The difference between a river and the sea is that the river looks fluid, the sea solid, usually looks as if you could step out and walk on it. The captain has this peculiarity: he cannot tell the truth in a plausible way. In this he is the very opposite of the austere Scot who sits midway of the table. He cannot tell a lie in an unplausible way. When the captain finishes a statement, the passengers glance at each other privately, as who should say, "Do you believe that?" When the Scot finishes one, the look says, "How strange and interesting." The whole secret is in the manner and method of the two men. The captain is a little shy and diffident, and he states the simplest fact as if he were a little afraid of it, while the Scot delivers himself of the most abandoned lie with such an air of stern veracity that one is forced to believe it, although one knows it is. So, for instance, the Scot told about a pet flying fish he once owned, that lived in a little fountain in his conservatory and supported itself by catching birds and frogs and rats in the neighboring fields. It was plain that no one at the table doubted this statement. By and by, in the course of some talk about custom house annoyances, the captain brought out the following simple everyday incident, but through his infirmity of style, managed to tell it in such a way that it got no credence. He said, I went ashore at Naples one voyage when I was in that trade, and stood around helping my passengers, for I could speak a little Italian. 2 or 3 times at intervals, the officer asked me if I had anything dutiable about me, and seemed more and more put out and disappointed every time I told him no. Finally, a passenger whom I had helped through asked me to come out and take something. I thanked him, but excused myself, saying I had taken a whiskey just before I came ashore. It was a fatal admission. The officer at once made me pay sixpence import duty on the whiskey, just from ship to shore, you see? And he fined me £5 for not declaring the goods, another £5 for falsely denying that I had anything dutiable about me, also £5 for concealing the goods, and £50 for smuggling, which is the maximum penalty for unlawfully bringing in goods under the value of sevenpence halfpenny. Altogether, £65 sixpence for a little thing like that. The Scot is always believed, yet he never tells anything but lies, whereas the captain is never believed, although he never tells a lie, so far as I can judge. If he should say his uncle was a male person, he would probably say it in such a way that nobody would believe it. At the same time, the Scot could claim that he had a female uncle and not stir a doubt in anybody's mind. My own luck has been curious all my literary life. I never could tell a lie that anybody would doubt, nor a truth that anybody would believe.